Your food stays cold without a single watt of electricity. It has done so for 4,000 years. The technology is dirt, geometry, and physics. It costs less than $300 to build. And the average American household spends $1,400 every year running a refrigerator that will break in 11 years and end up in a landfill. That is not a coincidence. That is not progress. That is a replacement of something permanent with something you will buy again. The home appliance industry generates $130 billion annually in the United States alone. Refrigeration is its anchor product. It's a guaranteed repeat sale. It's engineered dependency. Not because cold storage requires electricity. Because electricity-based cold storage requires a manufacturer, a warranty, a service contract, and a replacement cycle. The global cooling appliance market is projected to reach $230 billion by 2030. That number only works if people keep buying. A hole in the ground does not require a purchase order. Here is the question that the next 12 minutes will answer. Who decided that a compressor, a condenser coil, and a $1,400 annual energy draw would go into every home in the developed world instead of a passive underground chamber that our ancestors built in a single afternoon and used for 100 years without a single repair? By the end of this, you will understand exactly how that decision was made. And more importantly, you will understand that it was never actually made. It was simply assumed by every contractor, every code writer, every banker who financed a standard kitchen. The archive opens now. The archive opens in the Loire Valley, France. The year is 1642. A farmer walks to the north-facing slope behind his stone house. He does not carry a power tool. He carries a spade. Over 3 days, he excavates a chamber into the hillside, roughly 8 feet deep, 6 feet wide, and 7 feet tall. He lines the floor with gravel. He frames the entrance with timber and stone. He hangs a heavy oak door. Inside that chamber, the temperature never rises above 50 degrees Fahrenheit in summer, never drops below 32 in winter. His carrots, turnips, cured meats, and ceramic jars of preserved fruit sit undisturbed for 9 months of the year, safe, cold, and dry. That chamber is still standing, not a replica, not a reconstruction. The original structure, intact, has been in continuous agricultural use for over 300 years. This is a root cellar. And it is not French. It is not medieval. It is not even Western. Archaeologists excavating sites in modern-day Israel and Jordan have documented underground food storage chambers dating to 2000 BCE. Clay-lined pits, 4 to 6 feet below grade, maintained ambient temperatures between 45 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, using nothing but earth mass and passive airflow. 4,000 years ago, no insulation industry, no energy grid, no planned obsolescence. In colonial America, every farmstead had one, not as a luxury, as infrastructure. The 1870 U.S. Agricultural Census recorded root cellars on over 80% of rural properties. They stored potatoes, apples, beets, cabbage, dairy crops, and salted meats through winters that reached -20 degrees above ground. The modern refrigerator was introduced for residential use in 1927. By 1960, the root cellar had nearly vanished from American construction, not because it stopped working, but because the grid arrived. The appliance industry arrived with it, and the building trades rewired themselves around what could be sold. A root cellar built in 1920 is still cold today. A refrigerator built in 1920 is in a museum. That contrast is not about technology improving. That contrast is about dependency being installed. So how does it actually work? That is where this gets precise. Forget what you know about refrigeration as a mechanical process. Strip it back to the physical principle. Cold storage requires one thing: a stable thermal environment below food spoilage temperature. That is approximately 32 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit for most produced and preserved foods. Your electric refrigerator achieves this by mechanically extracting heat. A compressor pumps refrigerant through a cycle that absorbs heat from the interior and expels it into your kitchen. It fights the ambient temperature of your home continuously, every minute of every day, because your kitchen is 68 to 75 degrees and it is trying to maintain 37. The earth does not fight ambient temperature. It is the ambient temperature. Below 4 to 6 feet of undisturbed soil in most temperate climates, the ground stabilizes at a near constant temperature of 45 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit regardless of season. This phenomenon is called the thermal mass buffer. The Earth absorbs summer heat slowly over months and releases winter cold slowly over months, averaging the two extremes into a narrow, stable band. No compressor, no refrigerant, no electricity. Just physics. Here's what that means in structural terms. A properly built root cellar has 4 critical components: depth, drainage, ventilation, and mass. Component number 1. Depth. The floor must be set at a minimum of 6 feet below grade, ideally 8. At 6 feet, you access the thermal buffer. At 8 feet, you lock into it. In northern climates above the 40th parallel, 8 feet gives you a reliable 45 to 50 degrees year-round. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory soil thermal analysis data confirms ground temperature stabilization at 4 to 6 feet across the continental United States, varying by region from 45 degrees in Minnesota to 65 degrees in Louisiana. Component number 2, drainage. Standing water destroys a root cellar through humidity, mold, and freeze-thaw cycling. A proper floor is 4 inches of compacted gravel over undisturbed subsoil. No concrete slab. Concrete traps moisture. Gravel drains it. Drainage channels cut into the gravel bed direct infiltration water away from the storage area. A correctly drained root cellar maintains relative humidity between 85 and 95%, ideal for produce. Mold begins at stagnant moisture, not at managed humidity. Component number 3. Ventilation. This is the component most modern builders omit, and it is the reason most amateur root cellars fail. Passive ventilation requires 2 ducts, 1 low intake, 1 high exhaust. Cold air enters near the floor, travels across the thermal mass of the stored goods, picks up warmth and carbon dioxide released by producing respiration, and exits through the high vent. This cycle prevents ethylene gas buildup, the compound responsible for accelerated spoilage, and maintains oxygen levels that slow bacterial activity. Vent diameter matters, a minimum 4-inch diameter duct for every 100 square feet of floor space. This is not folk wisdom. It is gas exchange biology. Component number 4. Mass. Earthen walls are the refrigerant. A root cellar dug directly into a hillside, what builders call an in-ground or bank-style cellar, uses the surrounding soil as a continuous thermal reservoir. For freestanding root cellars built below a structure, the walls must be constructed of high-mass materials, stone, brick, or poured concrete with minimum 8-inch thickness. Insulating the ceiling from the structure above is critical. Without ceiling insulation, the cellar couples to the house temperature rather than the earth temperature. A 6-inch layer of rigid foam board on the cellar ceiling achieves an R value of approximately R30, sufficient to decouple the cellar thermally from the living space above. Compare this system to its manufactured alternative on every metric that matters. An American refrigerator consumes an average of 500 kilowatt-hours per year. At current national average electricity rates, that is $70 to $100 per year in operating cost, compounding annually for the life of the appliance. The average refrigerator lifespan is 11 to 14 years before major component failure. Replacement cost $800 to $2,000. Total lifetime cost of a single refrigerator over 40 years, including 3 replacement units and continuous energy draw, approximately $7,200. A root cellar built for $300 in materials operates for 100 years with zero energy cost and requires nothing but occasional drainage inspection. That is not a marginal improvement. That is a different civilization. We still have not explained the most important part. Why, if this data is documented and the physics are settled, is this technology actively excluded from modern construction? That answer is coming. But first, understand what you are actually up against. No memo was ever sent. No meeting was ever held. No executive at a refrigerator company sat in a boardroom and decided to eliminate the root cellar from American life. The system simply optimized for what the system rewarded. Post-World War II American construction was rebuilt around speed, uniformity, and financing. The Federal Housing Administration standardized mortgage eligibility around specific construction criteria. Standard framing, standard electrical, standard plumbing, standard kitchen appliances. A home with a root cellar and no refrigerator did not fit the FHA checklist. It could not be financed through conventional mortgage structures. The International Residential Code, the Model Building Code adopted by 49 U.S. states, governs residential construction in detail. It specifies stud spacing, electrical panel requirements, and HVAC standards. It does not contain a single prescriptive pathway for passive underground food storage. A builder who wants to include a root cellar must navigate local variance requests, health department interpretations around food storage spaces, and in many jurisdictions potential classification conflicts with basement habitability standards. This is not obstruction, it is absence. And absence in code compliance functions as obstruction. Insurance compounds the problem. Standard homeowners insurance policies are written against standard construction. Underground storage chambers not tied to the main structure are frequently excluded from dwelling coverage. A contractor who builds a non-standard feature carries liability exposure that no standard contract covers. So contractors do not build them. Not because they are difficult, because the paperwork ecosystem does not support them. And then there is the appraisal system. Real estate appraisers value homes against comparable sales. If no comparable home in the neighborhood has a root cellar, its presence adds zero to appraised value. A builder who installs one cannot recover the cost at resale. The market does not price permanence, it prices convention. A refrigerator that lasts 12 years generates a replacement sale, an energy contract, and a service warranty. Permanence is not a design failure, it is a market failure. The house you are sitting in right now was built by a contractor who was financed by a bank, inspected by a code official, and appraised by someone whose entire professional framework assumes electrified appliances, replacement cycles, and grid dependency. None of them are villains. All of them are nodes in a system that was never designed to accommodate anything that lasts longer than its payment plan. The question is not whether it works. The data established that decades ago. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory has published extensive thermal mass research documenting earth contact building performance, confirming that below-grade structures in temperate climates maintain passive temperature stability within the 40 to 55 degree Fahrenheit range without mechanical intervention. Their building envelope research validates the physics of earth-sheltered and semi-subterranean structures as viable passive thermal systems. The University of Missouri Extension Service published root cellar construction guidelines, still in circulation, documenting temperature performance, humidity management, and produced longevity data showing that properly constructed passive cellars preserve root vegetables for 4 to 6 months with less than 12% spoilage loss, outperforming refrigerator storage for produce varieties, including potatoes, carrots, beets, parsnips, apples, and cured alliums. In Europe, they did not abandon the concept, they industrialized it. Germany's KfW efficiency house standards have incorporated earth contact thermal mass as a recognized passive cooling and storage mechanism in certified low-energy construction since the 1990s. In Austria, the Vorarlberg region has seen a resurgence of traditional cellar-level food storage incorporated into new passive house construction as an off-grid food preservation system, with regional building departments issuing standardized permits for the structure type. In South Korea, the kimchi-ongji cellar, a traditional earthenware fermentation and cold storage system set below grade, has been formally recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage practice and integrated into modern Korean food infrastructure planning. These are not homesteaders. These are national building agencies, heritage organizations, and university extension services. The evidence does not need to be assembled. It exists. The problem is not evidence, it is distribution of that evidence and who controls the channels through which construction knowledge flows to the people building homes. This is not theoretical. People are building these today. In the Ozark Mountains of southern Missouri, a homesteading community of 12 families built a shared root cellar complex in the spring of 2019. Total material cost, $2,400 for the shared structure, $200 per family. Build time, 1 weekend, 12 participants, no heavy equipment. The structure is dug into a north-facing slope, 8 feet deep at the floor, with stone-lined walls, gravel drainage, and dual PVC ventilation pipes. As of this recording, it has stored 5 consecutive years of winter produce for all 12 families without a single mechanical failure, because there are no mechanical parts to fail. On a single-family scale, the numbers are equally accessible. A basic hillside root cellar for a family of 4, approximately 80 square feet of floor space, requires the following materials: pressure-treated timber framing, estimated $180, gravel drainage fill, 2 cubic yards, approximately $60. Concrete block or stone for walls if not using earthen construction, approximately $120. 2 4-inch PVC vent pipes with caps, $30. A pre-hung insulated door, $90 to $150. Total, $480 to $150. Total, $480 to $560 in materials, depending on local prices. Labor, if you provide it yourself with 2 helpers over 2 weekends, 0 additional cost. Projected operational cost over 40 years, 0. Compare that to $7,200 for the electrified alternative. The difference, $6,700, represents groceries, school supplies, a paid-off vehicle. That is what passive cold storage returns to a family that builds once and uses forever. Materials are not exotic. Gravel is at every landscape supply yard. Timber framing follows standard residential construction practice any contractor can execute. Bent pipe is at every hardware store. There is no specialty supply chain. There is no proprietary system to license. There is no manufacturer who must be paid to activate it. The earth is already there. The physics is already running. The only thing missing is the decision to build. If you were sitting in a home with a backyard, a hillside, or even an unfinished basement with exterior access, the infrastructure for this already exists in the geography you already own. You are 1 building permit and 2 weekends from food independence that will outlast your mortgage. You now know something that was not taught in any construction school, printed in any home building magazine, or suggested by any appliance salesman. You know that cold storage existed before electricity, that it worked better than electricity, that it still works, and that the reason it disappeared had nothing to do with performance, and everything to do with who profits when performance disappears. This channel exists because the archives are still open, the evidence is still there, and every person who builds something permanent is a direct act of defiance against a system that profits from your dependency. If this reaches you, share it. Every share preserves what they tried to erase. Subscribe to Frontier Trapper. The next archive opens soon. The ground remembers. Now so do you.